missions, communicating with people. They were saying, well, but what would you do with that? Because you can collect certain pieces of evidence, or maybe even just facts, but you don't have any procedural mandate in order to conduct investigations, etc. But at the end of the day, we've reached certain understanding, and everybody understood this kind of documentation is very important because law enforcement really lack human resources right now to deal with this, though they very had some doubts at first. And yet we started working in 2022 and we've got quite serious and tangible results. This is not in the presentation, but we are very proud that more than 30 Russian military through OSCE and examination was identified, and 4 cases were given to the organizations dealing with sanctions. And we constantly cooperate with various legal groups dealing with universal jurisdiction, not even mentioning that within the framework of the coalition Ukraine 5 o'clock and other coalitions, we are actively cooperating with them and we are sharing this information. So, if to answer the question why we are doing this and in what way we are working with people who are victims and witnesses, then let me mention that we've got these 2 key goals. In the first place, we would like the perpetrators to be held liable, and the second goal is related to right to truth. We are preserving the truth and telling the truth about the war. And we started even training people to do this. We have schools for those documenting war crimes.
Навчальні курси з воєнного сторітелінга.
And also we have the storytelling trainings. So, speaking about these goals, they are tightly related, closely related to transitional justice as well. And actually, we have more goals, but these 2 would be the major ones. And I believe it all works well in this very case. So, speaking about people with whom we communicate, it's very important that people who talk to us would understand our goals in the first place, and it's very important that people who are telling us their stories or are informing us about the facts, for them to actually participate in our achieving of these goals, for them to feel themselves partners of this process, not just people who from whom some information needs to be fished out. I remember this one of the first field missions. It was a common mission with the representatives of various organizations. It was held in a Yagidne village, and I was really worried how to communicate with witnesses. And several days actually passed since the village was liberated and people could leave the school. At first, people were saying no, and it was obvious that people were really traumatized, and I was even scared a bit to approach them. So, sometimes people would say no at first, but later on they started talking and we couldn't stop them, like for 2 hours sometimes. So we understood that this is not just about our need to collect this information, but that's the need of these people to have their story told. And for sure, our organization is working not just in terms of documenting war crimes, but we also have this educational program, and we have special trainings for those from the risk groups. And for many years, we've got this scheme where we've got those providing legal advice, psychological support, and we've applied this very approach when working with witnesses and victims. If we have a good resource for that, in the course of interviewing people, communicating with people, we also try providing legal advice. And sometimes people can benefit from our program which implies psychological support. And for sure, we are doing needs assessment. We are documenting war crimes in Chernihiv Oblast. Well, it happened so because, namely, our organization is located in Chernihiv Oblast. And also a separate topic would be war crimes, which are related to aerial attacks on schools, on educational institutions. And we're always asking people yet another question, what would be their needs or the needs of educational institutions? We can't promise anything, but at least we're trying to refer them to other organizations, I mean humanitarian organizations. And this really works well. And certain schools already got certain assistance and support. And we also involve them into certain activities we implement.
Якби такий профіль освіти
And also, as far as we are specializing in human rights, our approach is for sure human-centered approach or human rights-centered approach. And here we've got two components. The external one, where the goal of our activities would be human rights and adherence to human rights. We are discussing it with people all the time whom we are interviewing. We want to actually have such a situation in place when the perpetrators are held liable and the victims to actually full-fledgedly restore their rights. And I was underlining repeatedly that we are becoming great partners in this process. Unfortunately, I can't think back of those instances when international organizations were active within this territory as well, and still some military actions were taking place. There was this huge desire of certain international organizations, experts, to interview us. They were trying to connect via Skype. And sometimes it looked very aggressive, and I myself felt this very approach, which is not really human rights-based approach. And unfortunately, we've faced this reality that there was this one international organization. It offered us bringing witnesses from Yahidne, Ivanivka, Lukashivka to Kyiv because their protocol did not allow them to come here. And these were very weird, actually, approaches to us, and this was not a human-centered approach at all.
We try to avoid these practices. We try to base our activity engaging our counterparts, our interlocutors as true partners. The second component of our human rights-based approach in the documentation process, this is the internal component. We are following human rights standards, so we've built a series of simple rules and simple principles for ourselves. And I would kindly ask my colleague Jana to help me with that bit of the presentation. In brief, please. Yes, I'm Jana. I'm responsible for communications here, and also I document war crimes, and I will briefly say a few words about the principles we use in war crimes documentation, in witness interviews, and the practical implementation of the principles, not just theory. In brief, the most important principle is do no harm. Of course, we take care about not harming the witness, the victim, and us, the interviewers, because we should not harm ourselves as well. Second, that is security, because we sometimes go on a field mission to the so-called gray zones where you can get shelled, where there are drone strikes. So we always think of physical security of our interlocutors and ours. Another principle is voluntariness. We never convince people to talk to us, so like some journalists do. It's always voluntary when witnesses or victims want to talk to us. And Of course, another pillar of the human-based approach, it's respect. We treat every person we talk to with respect. Also, I would like to say a few words that these principles are not the only principles we follow in work, but we also teach people because we have a school on visual storytelling, we have a training session on war crime documentation. So this is how we teach people. Another principle is active listening. We always want to show that we are listening. We keep visual contact. We don't just look into the computer and take notes. Even though I know that sometimes war crime documenters can act like that, but we try to never do that. Well, in some cases, an assistant interviewer can take notes, but they should be active listening. And we always think about appropriateness of statements. Like, for example, for people who return from captivity, we never say, I understand what you've been through, because we actually, we can't, we were not the prisoners of war. So, empathize. Oh, and of course, it takes a balance, because you empathize with everyone, you will burn out soon. And another principle is open questions, because only open questions help reveal the story. But sometimes we use closed questions for clarification. And what's important in our work to differentiate a fact from a judgment or an opinion. So we always use fact-checking based on 3 sources. So we recheck everything we find out. We've had cases when witnesses were telling a very realistic picture about a specific event in bright details, and when we asked whether you saw it with your own eyes, they said, no, I just heard how my neighbor was telling about this. So we have to be really careful. We have to verify everything. We have to find out the source of the information. And the last principle I would like to mention is take care. What I mean here, we have to take care about the witness, the victim, and we have to take care about ourselves as interviewers. When we talk to victims and witnesses, we never start with, I don't know, some specific tragic question about a specific situation. We have to create a rapport and guide the person into the interview as if we take them by the hand and as if we lead them through the situation, and also we have to take the person out of the situation. We shouldn't leave the person on their own with the experiences. We take care to not re-traumatize a person after the interview. And we always have water and tissues when we have interviews, because they often start crying, or they might experience other emotions. So we, even as interviewers, we also have to be able to know the practices of regulation and self-regulation to help the interviewee calm down and get back to normal, and help ourselves. This is based on our experience. I don't think it's something new, but we learned it in practice and it's effective. And it's important because this is the experience we get while the active conflict is going on, while war is going on. And what's important is that here we all are part of the 5 a.m. coalition. As part of the coalition, we exchange the information, the experiences, and we can jointly do these events. Thank you so much for your expertise and for your experience and for your work.
Meanwhile, we are going to our international guests and to their experience, because for us it's very important, something that we are facing now, they had faced long before, and it is very important to see their path to accountability, to justice. And we often meet these people in different places of the world, like The Hague. For example, I met Mohammed in The Hague this summer. And together we are struggling for accountability for justice from very different points, from very different experience, but the expectations of our communities are very similar. And on this stage, I want to give a floor to Miss Natya Navrozov, who will tell us more about the Yazidis community tragedy. It is not well known in Ukraine, to be honest, and your fight for justice is not known in Ukraine. So we are very much interested in your experience and what stages did you overcome already, and what is your further steps? What are you going to do with this awful crime, and how are you going to achieve this accountability? Do you still have this hope? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for having me. And I would start by saying I think hope is one of the most important things that we should keep as human rights defenders, advocates. I would also like to start by thanking you, the organizers, for having me. It's my first time in Ukraine. And over the past days, I have been learning so much. And also, I have been seeing so many similarities with my own context in Iraq. So it's very insightful. So I will give a presentation if it could be put up. But I would like also to first start by asking how many of you, if you can raise your hands, had heard about the Yazidi community before 2014? Yeah, a few? Okay, that's good. There are actually a few Yazidis living in Ukraine. I don't have the statistics, but you also have a few who live here. While they put my presentation up, I will start by telling you who the Yazidis are, because I think it's very important to understand who we are as a community. I'm also Yazidi. I was born in Georgia. I have been working in Iraq for the past 6 years, trying to help my community after they were attacked by the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, ISIL, or Daesh. So Yazidis, we believe that our faith is 6,000 years old, so very, very ancient. From the ancient Mesopotamia, we believe in one God called Khode, as well as 7 angels. Throughout the different generations, our faith has been misinterpreted to a point where Christians, but also Muslims, started to call us devil worshippers. So this is one of the justification ISIS used to justify the genocide against the Yazidis. One of our symbols is the peacock, so you can see that on the screen. And Yazidis are scattered around the world, so we don't have a country per se, but we have a homeland that is Sinjar, that is in northern Iraq, and this is the place that ISIS attacked. In terms of statistics, we are a little bit over 1 million people in the world, as I said, in Georgia, but also a big diaspora in Armenia. Germany has the biggest diaspora. I grew up in France. So we're all over the place, unfortunately, and this is because of the long history of persecutions we have been facing. So ISIS was not the first group that attacked Yazidis. Before ISIS, Al-Qaeda in Iraq also was targeting Yazidis, and before that, the Ottoman Empire killed a lot of Yazidis also during the Armenian genocide. So we have a long, long history of persecution. Next slide. Maybe I just do that. So what happened in 2014? So you know that ISIS first occupied territories in Syria in 2013, and then they started to advance towards Iraq. They first took the city of Mosul in the summer, in June 2014. A lot of the people I spoke to at that time did not really understand what ISIS was. Some people knew it was a terrorist group. Others thought it's just a political group. You know, there's so much instability in Iraq that they thought, okay, it's just another political group that says they're going to liberate us and then, you know, take over and leave us alone. You know, whoever governs me doesn't change anything for me because my daily life is very difficult. This is a little bit the mentality that there was also in Mosul. And also when ISIS came to Mosul, the Iraqi army that was there withdrew. You know, people just thought, okay, I'm not being paid, I'm not going to sacrifice my life. So that's also why it was so easy for ISIS to take Mosul. Once they got Mosul, 2 months later in August, they started to advance towards Sinjar. So as I told you, this is the homeland of the Yazidis. So when they did that, Yazidis there also thought, they took Mosul, nothing really happened. It's going to be the same for us. The Yazidis who were scared and tried to leave were actually also stopped. They were not allowed by the forces there to leave. De facto, that area was controlled by the Peshmergas, the Kurdish forces. They did not allow Yazidis to leave. So people had to stay in Sinjar, and when ISIS came, they encircled the whole area. And the way they attacked Sinjar was different from Mosul. They clearly had a genocidal plan. So they started by separate men from women, men who were older than, the age that they thought people could still be brainwashed, usually between 12 and 15. So people above that were executed systematically, put in mass graves. Women and children were taken as captives and enslaved. And you might have seen that's something that the media also picked up a lot, the sexual slavery Yazidi women and girls specifically were subjected to. And then the boys were militarized. They were made the so-called cubs of the caliphate. They were taught the Quran, ISIS ideology, and they had to fight ISIS and they had to hate Yazidis. This is what they were taught. In terms of the consequences of the attacks, in a matter of a few days, almost 6,000 people were killed, as I said, mainly men, but also elderly people who were deemed not useful enough for the caliphate, so they were killed. 6,500 women and children were kidnapped, and over 500,000 of the Yazidis from Sinjar, everyone was displaced. So by the end of ISIS attacks on Sinjar, there was no single Yazidi that was free. Either Yazidis were captured, killed, or some of them managed to escape on Sinjar mountain. In addition to the human casualties, ISIS also attacked the property of Yazidis with the intention to really eradicate their existence. So ISIS destroyed Yazidi temples, shrines, over 68 of these, cultural heritage sites. I also thinking about the past few days in Ukraine, I saw a lot of similarities, Russia attacking cultural centers and also committing the same type of crimes. In terms of the consequences today, so you will hear Yazidi survivors often say the genocide is still ongoing, because literally nothing of the issues Yazidis have been facing over the 10 years have been resolved. Only 200,000 Yazidis have returned to Sinjar, the initial homeland. It remains very unsafe. It's controlled by almost 12 armed groups right now, including Turkey that is bombing, Iran-backed armed militias. So the area is very, very unsafe. 160,000 people still live in IDP camps, so in tents that are 10 years old, with very difficult situations. Around the same number of Yazidis left Iraq because they said there is no future here. I cannot go back to Sinjar. I don't want to live in a tent, so I'm going to leave. So a lot of them went to Australia, went to Germany and Europe in general, the US a little bit as well. Something that is very, very dramatic is that we still have 2,600 missing Yazidis, so women and children, who are still with ISIS. And once in a while you will hear, and we had a few weeks ago, one survivor who came back from almost 10 years of captivity. So these women and children are either in Iraq, somewhere we don't know of, in Syria, in Turkey, and we have been calling for 10 years for a mechanism, to look for them, and it still hasn't happened. So that's, on top of that, we also have 90 mass graves. So when ISIS, as I said, killed the men, they left mass graves and kill sites. We documented over 90 of them. So it's in this context that Yazda was created, very traumatic context that the NGO I'm leading was created. And Yazda was really just an effort of Yazidis themselves, like no idea about what a nonprofit is, no idea about what advocacy is, human rights. I'm sure it also happened in the Ukrainian context where people just, it's a survival instinct when you're attacked, when your people are threatened, you just need to do something. So Yazda was literally created 3 weeks after ISIS attacks on Sinjar. And since then, we have been working, as much as we can. And we have two main mandates. One is humanitarian. We'll provide Yazidi survivors with psychosocial support, livelihood projects, education projects. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on the second mandate, which is the justice work that we're doing. But just to give you an idea, today Yazda is registered in the US, in Iraq, in the UK, and we have around 50 employees. So this is a humanitarian project that we have. It's a mobile medical bus that goes to Sinjar, to different villages, to provide people with medical care. Because as I said, Sinjar is still unsafe and pretty much still destroyed. So what about the justice work? So as I said, you know, the difference I think with Ukraine is that Yazidis don't have a country. We don't have embassies, we don't have representation. Our people are also very simple. Like in Sinjar was the poorest area in Iraq even before ISIS attacked. Yazidis didn't have access to education. As I said, people were not, you know, understanding what human rights is, what advocacy is. So our advocacy in the first years was very emotional. You know, it was mainly survivors speaking. And I think that's why also we got such an international platform, because Yazidi survivors are literally the first ones, and even until now, the only ones who spoke about the sexual violence that ISIS was committing. We also know that ISIS enslaved Christians, Shabak, Turkmens, Kakais, other minorities, but they are not speaking about it because their community stigmatize them, don't allow them. But we Yazidis, we very early on, when the women started to come back, let them talk because, you know, the world needed to hear. So you might know survivors like Nadia Murad. She got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018. That made our advocacy even stronger. And then, you know, since that, around 20 countries, including the UN, have recognized the Yazidi genocide symbolically in the parliament. Ukraine is not one of them, but maybe that's something we can work on together. But these genocide recognitions, again, are very symbolic, political. So what about concrete justice, you know? And that's what I'm going to focus on. So when a group like ISIS attacks your community, the first, I'm a lawyer and I studied international law. The first mechanism you think of is the International Criminal Court, right? You think, okay, if such crimes are committed, this is the mechanism you want to go to. The problem is that Iraq has not signed the Rome Statute, so ICC doesn't have jurisdiction. But the second option could be that, what about, you know, the other nationals who joined ISIS? You might know that people from over 85 countries have joined ISIS, including French, you know, Germans, Tunisians, many people whose countries are part of the Rome Statute. So in 2015, we tried to bring a submission to the ICC. They told us, look, we understand, but no, like the evidence you're giving us is not enough. So it did not go anywhere, but it doesn't mean we cannot try again, especially since now the prosecutor Karim Khan is someone who worked on Iraq for the past 3 years. Before he became prosecutor, he was head of UNITAD, which I will also mention. We said, okay, ICC, door closed. What about the creation of international tribunal or hybrid tribunal, like it was done for the former Yugoslavia, for Rwanda? If the international community doesn't create such a mechanism for ISIS, then for who are you going to create it? Because ISIS is literally 85 plus countries. Again, we were told no, there's no appetite, there's no money. This idea of international tribunals is gone, you know, the train has passed. But what we will give you instead is a UN mechanism, so-called UNITAD, that will help you to document. You know, let's start by documenting the crimes so we have the evidence, and then let's see. Okay, so that was what we were told. We said, okay, you know, what we cannot say no to that. So UNITAD was created. They were sent to Iraq as a UN investigative mechanism to collect evidence. But 2 months ago, in September, the mechanism was closed. The mechanism was closed because every year it had to be approved by Iraq, because UNITAD came from the invitation of Iraq. And Iraq, 1 year ago, said, I'm renewing UNITAD, but just for 1 more year. So for the past year, we were asking, okay, UNITAD is closing, what's the plan, what's the plan, what's the plan? And no answer. So right now, and I'm not kidding, the UNITAD evidence that was collected for 6-7 years is in a basement in New York. And it's unclear if one day we can have access, for what. Over 200 million, maybe more, dollars were spent on this mechanism, including, you know, by many different countries. I don't know if Ukraine contributed, but UN countries, especially from the Security Council, contributed. And, you know, speaking about failures of international mechanisms, I think that's a concrete example where you raise expectations of survivors, because UNITAD interviewed survivors, told them, I will use your evidence one day for something concrete, and then just closed very quietly without any plan. And Iraq is not telling us what's going to happen. Very briefly on Iraq, part of our work as well has been to push Iraq to do something, because most of the crimes were committed in Iraq. The Yazidis are Iraqi citizens, and the evidence is in Iraq. But up until today, 10 years since the crimes, Iraq has not prosecuted one single ISIS member for international crimes, simply because Iraq doesn't have a legislation that criminalizes international crimes. So what they have been doing over the past 10 years is to prosecute only for terrorism. So putting the protection on the state, but completely disregarding the victims. So terrorism trials are ongoing, they're very untransparent, we don't know who is being prosecuted. Most of the ISIS members are sentenced to death without any possibility for the victims to know who is still alive or not. So where did we really fail when it comes to the Yazidi genocide? So the problem with ISIS is that it was mainly perceived as a terrorist group that needed to be eliminated. So the coalition against ISIS was created, the response was very heavily military, without any thinking about, okay, but they actually committed genocide against the Yazidis and other communities, how to prevent that in the future. There was no thinking about that. And to give you one example of how not addressing the root causes of a genocide is problematic, just a few months ago, we were marking the 10 mark of the Yazidi genocide. And at the same time, we had a huge hate speech wave against the Yazidis in Iraq, where people were telling us, you know, you deserve what happened to you, what ISIS did was not enough, like incitement to another genocide almost. And this is what happens when you don't address the root causes of a genocide. So what is our strategy moving forward? My colleague also mentioned transitional justice. This is really a framework we want to use moving forward to analyze and push forward the Yazidi genocide. So for those of you who don't know, transitional justice is a framework that allows you to look into the past when a conflict happened, to understand why did it happen, and then find solutions for the future so it doesn't repeat, and build a society that is peaceful. It's usually divided in 4 pillars: reparations, criminal justice, truth-telling, and guarantees of non-repetition. And we really believe moving forward, these pillars have to be applied to the Yazidi genocide. Otherwise, another genocide will occur, and the hate speech showed that in 1 year, 2 years, or even closer to that. In all of that, Yazda has been very, very active. As I said, we are Yazidi-led NGO. We started to document the crimes very early on. I will not go to the process of documentation. It's exactly almost similar to what my colleagues just described. And in terms of what we have collected, over 2,500 testimonies of survivors, all describing the same things, sexual enslavement, torture, being in captivity for almost a decade. As I said, we documented the mass graves in Sinjar, the crime scenes in general, and also the propaganda that ISIS was putting out there. So we have documented all of that, and we use that. This is just an example of, I don't know if you see, but this is a mass grave, and this is our colleagues who are documenting this mass grave in Sinjar. And we documented over 90 like that. And then we present what we find in reports. This is part of truth-telling. These reports are very important because it allows us to educate the broader society on what happened. Even in Iraq until now, when I go, for example, to the south of Iraq and I speak about the Yazidi genocide, people tell me, this really happened? And this is, in Iraq. So we should not neglect these things. Reports are very important as part of truth-telling. These reports were also used by some prosecutors abroad in their investigations as expert reports. So very, very important. I want to finish on some hope because we were talking about hope. So as I said, no justice in Iraq, but thanks to the evidence we have collected, we managed to bring 9 cases so far in Germany on the basis of universal jurisdiction. And these cases were thanks to survivors. Like, for example, we had 3 genocide convictions. In all of them, it was thanks to the testimony of one survivor. And these survivors are, people who traveled from Iraq to go to Germany to testify against their perpetrators. among these perpetrators, only one was a man. The rest were women, also to show that ISIS was not just men. Women actively participated in the crimes. And also it was mainly women because there's this European political position right now that we don't repatriate men, we only repatriate women. So in the future, we hope there will be more men prosecuted, although most of them are being killed. And then we also had a recent case in Sweden, a case in the Netherlands. We also have a case in France against Lafarge, which is a company that was financing ISIS. So we also need to be creative. It's not just individual perpetrators, it's a whole system usually. So Lafarge currently is facing charges. And then one last point, how to remain survivor-centered in all of that. Like how to make sure that we keep the survivor in the center of the process. So this is a guide we published based on all the experience we had with the German authorities, with the French authorities, the Dutch, etc. And it's meant to help non-Yazidis who interview Yazidis to be able to build trust. It gives you very practical guidance. Okay, if you choose an interpreter, which dialect should they speak? We had examples in some of these proceedings where the wrong dialect was chosen, so the survivor could not communicate. In the original Yazidi language, there is no word for rape. So when survivors describe rape, they say it in another way. So people who are not familiar with the culture, the norms, the taboos should be aware of that. And then one last example. The first time I went to a trial in Germany when a Yazidi survivor was facing her perpetrator, also in front of a German judge, a man, very experienced, who had no understanding of Iraq and Yazidis. She was describing how the perpetrator was torturing her by forcing her to stand on a roof, okay, under the sun. And she kept repeating that. And the judge kept asking her, but how could you go on the roof? Like, how is it that possible? And she thought he was not believing her. So she kept saying, I swear I'm saying the truth. He did that to me. I had to stand on the roof. At the end, we realized that the judge was thinking about a roof that was this shape. And the survivor was, the roofs in Iraq are flat because people use the roof there to sleep, like to do many different things. So these cultural things are very important to put in a guide, and this is what we try to do. And we also put pictures of houses so that you could see that the roofs were flat.
Thank you very much. This is extremely impressive, and also what you do and what your people had to face. And I'm sure that we heard a lot of new things for us, but also saw a lot of similarities with our struggle for justice. And while you were talking, I was thinking that we also talking about the International Tribunal, for example. We also have to think that many people can not understand what was going in Ukraine. So this is your experience is very, very important for us as well. And thank you. And I'm sure our audience will have questions to you, Natya. But we have to go not far from Iraq to Syria. And I want to give a floor to Mr. Fadel Abdulghani. Mr. Abdulghani, are you here? Can you hear us? I'm not sure. Fadel, Mr. Abdulghani, are you here? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Great, great. Thank you very much for joining us. Syrian situation is more, just Ukrainians are more aware about Syrian situation, at least because of Russia involving in this conflict. But there are so many different levels of this situation, and we were also very happy about this case on universal jurisdiction in Germany, when you succeed to do this for many survivors in different parts of the world. I think it was like very inspiring and meant that justice can be achieved. could you tell us more about this, about your way to justice? I mean, Syrian communities, those survivors and witnesses from Syria, and tell us about, I don't know, did something change about after the case in Germany was open?
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm deeply honored to participate with you. Hopefully next time I'll be in Ukraine in person. I visited Ukraine twice past years. So 14 years, almost 14 years after the Syrian complicated conflict, as you mentioned, we at Syrian Network for Human Rights has meticulously documented violations in Syria, including those perpetrated by Russian forces. Over time, our network established itself as a credible source for numerous UN bodies, international organizations, and governments worldwide in their assessment of Syria human rights landscape. So 3 points I want to highlight. The first one is the expectation and evolving perspective of Syrian victims and witnesses regarding accountability mechanism. When the popular uprising for democratic reform against the Assad regime commenced in March 2011, actually our expectation was high. So it's those emotion that the international community will prevent or at least eliminate those violations. So we documented the Syrian regime violation with precision, and we believe that this documentation would galvanize urgent international action to halt the atrocities. However, on the ground, hope for accountability through national mechanism quickly dissipated, or it's even not even exist. Syrian judicial system remains internally submissive to the regime. We don't have any dependency or jurisdiction in Syria. It's one of the most, or even most authoritarian regime globally, or far exceeding the repressive measures or by like other dictator regime such as Iran or even before Libya. So and from the early months, actually, Russia restored to using its veto power in the UN Security Council to shield the Syrian regime from any type of accountability. The first veto, and maybe a lot of you will hear that for the first time, took place in October 2011. So after a few months only, and it was a peaceful movement. There was no internal armed conflict in Syria. So this demonstrates the depth of Russian commitment to supporting Assad and its unwavering readiness to prevent international protection, to provide him international protection. Russia vetoes has precised over years, notably its veto in 2014 blocking the referral of Syria situation to the ICC, to International Criminal Court. And this was a critical junction. Subsequently, in September 2015, Russia escalated its involvement by the famous military intervention in Syria, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. This development rendered any prospect of establishing a special tribunal or referral to the Syrian file to the ICC virtually untenable. So it will be impossible, this referral, or establish a court, because this establishment also required approval from the UN Security Council. So following to this failure in international effort in 2014, and after the Russia military intervention, here the emergence of the universal jurisdiction took place. Unfortunately, this shift occurred approximately 4 years, so it's too late to prevent the entrenched impunity and escalated violations. And this will made me move ahead to my next point to talk about the universal jurisdiction, because it took place, it started in 2015, 2016. So the process before the European courts has actually rekindled the expectation of victims. However, certain activists and lawyers have unfortunately played a counterproductive role by overstanding these expectations, which runs counter to inherently limited scope to the universal jurisdiction. Universal jurisdiction is inherently constrained by several factors, the most notable of which are the territorial condition. The accused must be physically present within jurisdiction of the prosecuting country. This requirement makes the prosecution, the vast majorities of European countries require that. So this requirement makes the prosecution of high-ranking official exceedingly rare, as they often avoid traveling to such countries. Focus on lower-level perpetrators, consequently, most cases targeting individuals in lower-level position, thereby diminishing the overall impact of these processing. Despite actually these constraints, universal jurisdiction offers several significant advantages, including substanting focus on Syria issue. It's assure that the grave violation committed in Syria remain a subject of international security and attention, illuminating the systematic and the widespread nature of violation. For instance, for the conviction of Anwar Raslan not only held him accountable as individual, but also established that the act of the torture and sexual violence he perpetrated constitute crimes against humanity. These crimes, by definition, implicated the entire regime, thereby affirming the guilty of Assad regime as a whole. While universal jurisdiction addressed the important gap in achieving justice, it cannot serve as a comprehensive alternative to border international mechanisms such as the International Criminal Court. I here want to move to my last point, which is the challenges in maintaining a victim-central approach, aiming ongoing violations and limited international action. Actually, there is numerous challenges hinder effort to achieve justice, and addressing the need of victims in the Syrian context, and it's similar to Ukraine, Sudan, Libya. I trained a lot of human rights organization and activists, and I can say it's almost the same challenges we are facing. So the first one is the continuity of violations in Syria and in other conflict as well. Those ongoing atrocities, such as arbitrary arrest, torture, discriminate, chilling, forced displacement, those are embed the justice effort as victims face immediate threats to their safety and essential needs. The second one is the lack of international political will, and that's everywhere actually, because geopolitical prioritize often overshadow human rights concern, leading to inadequate support for the international justice mechanism. The third one is fragment accountability effort. The absence of the coherence international justice framework result in this, there is just disjointed effort. Even in Europe, this effort is not actually coherent. The fourth one is the exclusion of victims from decision making. Survivors are frequently marginalized in a high-level discussion on accountability mechanism, exacerbating their feeling of this lack of any representation. Limited access to justice mechanism. Geopolitical and procedural barriers often prevent victims, particularly those within Syria, from engaging directly in judicial process. The next one is the retraumatization during legal processing. As all of us know, the legal process, they're natural. It takes years. So this actually revisiting traumatic experience during this legal process, and especially in case of torture and sexual violence. The next one is the diverse need and competing prioritizing among victims. Victims' goal range from seeking truth and acknowledgement of surviving to obtain reparation or judicial accountability, complicating efforts to balance these prioritization. So the victim's approach is different from one to another. The next one is the insufficient resources for justice mechanism, chronic underfunding, and we all notice that there is not that much care about documentation of human rights violation, accountability, and all of that. So that actually undermined the ability of Justice Initiative to collect evidence, conduct investigation, and support trial effectively. The next one is the marginalized of women and vulnerable groups, women, children, and marginalized communities such as Yazidi. My colleague just finished. So they are faced unique burden of accessing justice mechanism, often silencing their voices and excluding them from justice process. The next one is the challenges in documentation itself, why the ongoing conflict, such as Ukraine, it's ongoing conflict, and at the same time, in Syria as well, there is a trial going on, there is cases. So those ongoing collecting credible evidence in context of ongoing conflict poses significant risk for those involved in documentation efforts. The next one is the lack of physical support for victims. As I mentioned, this process, how it's trauma sensitive, this need actually it's need victims to recover and at the same time engage in physical support. The next one is the erosion of trust in international institution, and that we deeply, because this prolonged victims, so there is a frustration in between the victims and also a prolonged failure. As I mentioned, even the universal jurisdiction, it took place after years from the conflict with minor success. So the next one is the victims suffer in host countries. Those actually who's requested to be witnesses and to engage are refugees, and they are vulnerable. They are weakened already. They are managing their life, and they used to be under percussion condition, embedding their ability to participate in justice process or seeking reparation. The last one is the neglect of long-term consequences of violations. Justice mechanisms rarely address the enduring needs of victims, such as economic recovery, improved education, and community reconstruction. I have here to overcome those challenges 8 recommendations. I think it will take us for the next level. The first one is strengthening international political will. The global community must set aside geopolitically consideration to support international accountability mechanism. So this should be a priority. It not should be like on the margin. Establish a uniform international accountability framework. Efforts should be focused on creating a special tribunal for Ukraine, Syria, and expanding the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court. The third one, ensuring victims' participation in the decision making. The fourth one is providing physical support. A comprehensive trauma-sensitive program should be developed to offer physical care, facilitating victims' recovery, and effective participation. That will lead to effective participation in justice process. Strengthening documentation in conflict areas. All of those trials, we engaged in multiple cases. Without documentation, we will not be able to share data to prove, to enhance the cases. We shared numerous data with the UN and also with those cases. The sixth one is empowering vulnerable group. The seventh one is raising awareness of universal jurisdiction limitations. That will sustain the victims' expectation, and this is very essential. It's achieving something, but it has a limit at the same time. It's a compose. It's not one black and white. The last one is addressing the long-term impact of violations. Comprehensive strategy are needed to rebuild conflict-affected communities, including program for economic recovery, education, and social reintegration of survivors. Thank you very much for having me and for your time.
Thank you, Fadel, for your, as usual, comprehensive presentation, and especially for your recommendations, because it's very, actual for everyone sitting here, I think. And this is something that we want to address to stakeholders also during this Crimea Global Conference. Please stay with us. I'm sure we will have a discussion afterwards. And for those who are watching us on YouTube channels of the Media Initiative for Human Rights and Crimea platform, I want to remind that you're watching this special event during the Crimea Global Conference 2024, dedicated to the victims' expectations from the global justice, from the justice mechanisms that are existing and that we hope to exist. So. Now I wanted to give a floor to our good friend Mohammed Hassan, who came to Ukraine from Uganda, not from Sudan, but for many years, I think more than 14 years, he had been documenting awful crimes in Darfur. And this is something that we know little about, but not much, and we want to know more about your work and about your efforts within the international advocacy, within documentation, and what are expectations of those who you're communicating with. What do you want to achieve, especially in the International Criminal Court, in the UN, and so on? Please tell us more.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Muhammad Adam Hassan. I'm from Darfur region, and I executive director of Darfur Network for Human Rights. I want to give you some, my colleagues, thank you for give background about activities, our documentation, our expectation, what you did. Actually, really very grateful. Um, for me, one of the victims of the 2003, if you know the 2003, there are 4 regions, a huge of the human rights violation happening at that time by farmers regime in Sudan. That time I was when I was displayment in Kalmakam. If you someone you know about Kalmakam, Kalmakam is big camp in South Darfur, one of the larger camp in Darfur region, almost like 70,000 family stay in one area. In 2003, when the militia Janjaweed last time, farmers call him Janjaweed, and now calling them RSF. When I attacked my area, that's time I remember with me and my mama, I was in a farm at like a 4 p.m. So we have the donkey, white donkey. We have local farm as the people who stay in the village. So the militia 3 person come. They have camel and one have horses. And when me and my mom, we have mom, he's the guiding the donkey. Me, I have that things called, I don't know, sorry by English, but I know we call muhrat. Muhrat something like to hand and donkey to moving and to grasses. That's sorghum. Those militia came, first one came, they told me, give me this donkey. That's one, only we have one donkey. Because before 1 week, our property, we have the cows, goats, all of them looted. So, and then only we have donkey at home, and this is helping us to make farm at home. So they said, give us this donkey. Me, I refuse. I refused to give. I said, no, I'm not giving you. That time, me, I was 16 years old. My mama told me, I said, give them. Me, I said, no. Immediately, started to shooting me. My mama is come to like holding me like this. Immediately, my mom is shooting in her heart. He immediately he died in front of me. From that time, I took my family to the Kalmakam, like 2 days moving to reach to the camp. So I have my 4 sisters and 3 brothers. I'm eldest one of them. So when I reached in Kalmakam, even I don't know, situation of the camp. Just UN and some NGOs give us small house. I will sleep with my family. I grew up there. And in 2005, the organization called Amnesty International, they came like mission to make investigation in camps. And when it came in our blocks, they meeting with me, spent me like the 2 hours. So they're very interesting about my story. So in that time, when they finished my interview, they recommend me to work with an organization called Amal Center. Amal Center is the local organization there, like for legal organization, and doing like paralegal and doing documentation. I get experience from documentation in 2006. So since that time, I don't have any idea, but I have hope. I will just have human rights is very important for me. So in 2014, the idea is coming for me. I make the organization. This name I make in Facebook page. Even I write by Arabic. That time it's not there. For me, I speak Arabic professionally. My English is the second language, and I have my mother language. So I create page called Shabakat Darfur al Insan. As by English, Darfur Network for Human Rights. So I started that's my dream, to work in why I saw the gap of the information. You know, our farmer regime, since 2000 up to 2018, our government is not allowed any organization of human rights to enter, even Amnesty International, to come visa by UN. UN, they give them, but if knows this person working with Amnesty International, they not give them visa to enter in Darfur, especially Darfur region. So that time we seen a lot of gap, no documentation. In Darfur region, we have two genocide. Genocide 2003 and second genocide 2023. In 2003, we have a lot of gap. We don't have any information of the genocide. We don't have any documentation related. Is it in Darfur happening this? And in fact, me, I one of the victims. I know what's happening in 2003. More than 10,000 tribe for Zakawa, Dajo, Tunjur, Masalit. This is the African tribe. This is the like 10,000 people died. So that's idea supposed to have us national organization, our local, that's calling Darfur Network for Human Rights. So this name related with the situation in Darfur underground. And Darfur is the history, as my friend said, the Yazidi. So this organization, after 2014, I was working with monitoring, working with that time helping Amnesty International in investigation in Darfur region. That time, if you remember, called chemical weapon used in Jabal Marra. I think if you hearing about our now writing in Google to find weapon, chemical weapon used it in Jabal Marra. So after working this report, immediately after 3 months, the report published by Amnesty International. I think that's office in Kenya. After the published report, immediately the government track our accounts, email, and my phone. That time, just we speak with the phone. We don't have any. That time, like use the VPN, use the signal. We don't know. Just use the phone. So I was arrested for 3 months. I was in the station. Finally, I have my friends. Good, he's the security helping me. Finally, he said the security headquarters in Khartoum decide to send me in Khartoum. He told me, Hassan, if you go into Khartoum, they will killing you because according to the discrimination, you from 4 tribe and from the Darfur region and you're working with Amnesty International. This is in law of Sudan, it's dangerous. He said, I'm going to release you, but even me, they can kill me or even me escape. Finally, released me, and also he escaped. And from that time, I escaped to the Kampala in 2017. When I reached Kampala, first, my dream, I said, to open our organization. I registered the Darfur Networks as the local organization in Kampala, and immediately I started to work to do documentation. Between 17 to the 2019, we started working with the ICC. This time, ICC started after new government in Sudan is coming. ICC also started to intervention to work with the victims, to reach the victims, to reach the witness, to come. So a lot of process. That's very thing I want to, for you also, I know Ukrainian case under ICC now, very important to make sure it is documentation, very important. During the first genocide, we don't have any information about database, about any information. Because our case, yes, the international organization, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, international NGOs, yes, reported. And that time, Luis Marina Cambo in 2005, yes, they make decision said in their phone happening genocide. After investigation, they said ICC has to make decision. So when it comes to the practical, ICC team, OTI plus outreach and plus BBRs, we need to come to sit with the victims and the witness. So when this time coming, after 20 years, we don't have any information. You believe me, we don't have any information. Even ICC, we don't have any information. Yes, the accused, but process of the justice. We need to sit with the victims, our witness. We need to have a lot of information. They have like 80 questionnaire about about testimony from the victims, our witness. This time, immediately came in my mind documentation very important, because now case of the Darfur in 2023, the ICC only make an interview with the 400 victims, and is including 400 victims, like 200. This is the outside, who's the immigration in Europe. This is the meet with them. Inside in Sudan and in Darfur, we're working together to find the victims. It is very difficult. So even VBRs, fund trust for the victims, we need for reparation, we don't have any data. So that's one of the give me hope. After 15th of April 2023, immediately after war started, I have a meeting with my team. So and also we have network, we have local organization, and we have human rights defender, and we have community community leaders grassroots. So immediately we had a meeting. I told them, please, from now, we need to have this war. We don't know end to where. In 2023, we lost any information. Let's now to start it to do. When it started from 2023 up to now, today, we have 10,000 cases. This including killing, including sexual violence, including adopting, including sexual service, including missing. Those information we do in this limited 2 years. What do you imagine? During 2 years, today I think war in Sudan after 15th of April, I think to 20 months, exactly 20 months in Sudan. In 20 months, we are documenting 10,000 cases. And in 10,000 cases, most of the cases, we are make statistics. We have, actually, I don't know, but supposed to give you simple of the how we make database. We have Excel sheet. Excel sheet, we have questionnaire, W question, name, date, gender, religions, and contacts, the area, the state, full narration. This information we find from 10,000, most of the victims here find sexual violence and torture. So I think this is the one of things. Actually, I'm here when I came in. I have 3 days in your country here. This case is very sensitive. I really, even before 2 hours when I went to that place, I asking just behind. I know asking some of the. I think some ladies here helping me actually said no, we are not talking, because this area is still Russia. He's around here. I don't know this area. The woman told me it is happening, but I can't talk about these things. Please be serious in this area. Please, serious to find this, document these cases. So, why documentation? It is very important. some information you cannot to find if you not to sit with the victims and survivor. We don't know impacts of this violation. We get a lot of impacts of these violations. I don't have time to talk about it, but this is what us Darfur Network we're doing right now, our going on. We have these conflicts. We lost 3 friends monitoring with us in Jinena, West Darfur. I think you know Jinena is one of the state Masalit tribe. Even in 2023 in June, in even governors of the that area killing by RSF, and finally that's state all tribes of Masalit, and after killing him, it immediately RSF is targeting this tribe more than 10,000, and all of them they're going to Chad. So during that time, we have 3 monitoring, the shooting them there, and now even the family now in Chad there. So our system has to do documentation. Agree with my colleagues. We have 2 types of the documentation. We have, it's called monitoring report, person who in the underground. We have coordinator report. We have human rights officer reporting and analysis. So these 3 types, all of them important, because monitoring, you know, in Darfur now after October 2024, the RSF controlling the area all. So we have monitoring in a grassroots. We training them, as my colleague are training them. We give them the form. This form, they have all question, how to fill this question. After that, to send the question to the field coordinator to send to review this report and to send to the human rights officer. Human rights officer is professional who know how to put context of this report. So in this area, we have 5 center. So we have center in Darfur region now. We have 3 center in South Darfur. In Central Darfur, it's called Zalinja. In North Darfur, it's called Fashir Tawila. Those camp, this is big camp. You know, the war in Darfur, a war in Sudan, all people from city go out to the camps. Opposite, in the previous 2000, the war from the village, people to come to the city. So that's give us opportunity, and we make center. You know, if to make investigation with the victims of sexual violence or torture, it is not easy. It is not easy. You know, sometimes victims, they have a lot of traumatization, of my colleagues mentioned, especially man of the sexual. So that is, we make this center and we bring the victims and to sit with them, sometimes 2 days, 3 days, sometimes week, to give you real information. And immediately we have network with some local organization and international organization, like from in Darfur region, we have MSF. MSF, we have collaboration. When do we find the victims of the sexual violence or torture, immediately to send them for the treatment. Actually, we have like 700 women affected by, they have infection, it's called infection. This is the impact of the sexual violence. So, in this time, we have the MSF, we have memorandum, and we have I told them we are doing documentation, but we not have any capacity to work in treatment and other related with the healthcare. So they accepted us. Now working together, when you have the victims, immediately after 10 hours, our 2 days, also they give us tableaus, medicine, our monitoring. They said this is if the victims of the torture or sexual violence during this hour, please give him or her this medicine. So now operating with them like this. We have center in South Sudan. If you some of you know South Sudan in West Bahr al Ghazal is called Awil. So this camp have like 20,000 civilian came from the Sudan. So also we have center there, and also we have center in Kampala. So why documentation it is very important? During this we are working on documentation, immediately case of the West Darfur, immediately ICC, we have meeting together and especially immediately address the, I think in 2023 I meet with you in a round table. I want in 2023 in what, in July? In June. In 2023 in June, I want to was with 5,000 cases. 5,000 cases. I took in my flash 5,000 cases. I went to the ICC. I told them, this is the right now. We have violation happening, and this is all case. Immediately, they told me, okay, we're going tomorrow. We are going to address in Security Council about what is happening. If this information is really, I told them, this information is really, and this is database, and you go look. This time we have like this, like 300 cases of the sexual violence. That's even we have testimony 100. This is a video. Victims, they send the voice as the victims telling the story. I send them to the ICC very confidentially. ICC immediately after the 1 week, they address issue in UN Security Council. After that, immediately the goods Darfur already under jurisdiction with the ICC. He said, okay, we're going to make the. Now we have another investigation. Let's work in case of the 2023. So this is the case on 2023. If you give me chance, let's. I don't know. I take time, is it? But yeah. Okay. So the immediately we are succeed. Address the ICC addressed the case of the 2023 in Darfur. Now in going on, and very easy make interview with the victims, and very easy reach the witness, and even perpetrators. According to the documentation, we reach them easy. Case 2022 became difficult than case 2023. That is documentation that give result. And also fact-finding mission of Sudan, as in all of you know. Fact-finding mission, this is really, they only give them only 5 persons. They give, the UN give 5 persons to work in investigation in crime on Sudan. In Darfur, only 1 person. So immediately we give them this information. So that is, I want to mention you the documentation, very important. So according to the expectation of the victims, actually my experience, and the victims still have hope for justice. But for me, my hope it is really limited because we have experience, and also ICC is still the mandate of the victims. I think last week we have I think also media initiative for human rights part of the we created called a victims' rights working group. So we're going to help in ICC how can to help the ICC about the victims' right, because we're seeing even as some victims they make testimony in front of the ICC and became traitor. ICC not protect them, and also about even in reparations also is limited. So this is the according to the international justice. But let me also I want to mention something very important about documentation. Documentation they have a lot of impacts. One of the impacts you can give you how to make litigation according to the university jurisdiction. As in Sudan, we have even African. We have African Union. We have some country like South Africa, Banjon, and Kenya and Uganda. Those we can make a litigation to the perpetrators, and also now even in international university jurisdiction, as my colleague in Brazil, also Brazil have a university jurisdiction, and in French they have university jurisdiction, the UK you have even United States. So this, if you have information, documentation, and cases, it is easy you can make this university jurisdiction. Can also we can also to address issue of the how to victims can find combination or reparation. We have cases now in Sudan. In this organization, we have now collaboration with the organization called Citifax Max. Citifax Max, they make the jurisdiction in Switzerland with the case of that's related with the gold mine. So now this case this company Sudan and Russia and Emirate in close with this case of the gold. So it is easy after we have documentation with the family of that area. Immediately now the case is moving well, and under the Switzerland case. So this is, and finally,
Just 20 seconds,
yes.
okay?
Yeah.
Now we have to finish.
Finally, I want to say, documentation is very important. I know I saw something. For me, I'm learned for 2 days. I learned something very important. You are dean. This is related with the transaction justice, related with the tell truth and memorization. That is very important. But I don't know in documentation what you style would it. I saw there's your organization also they mentioned the perpetrators of the especially in Russia. I saw them in which that is good. But isn't you doing documentation cases? It can help you in future, because it is very important to know how after 10 years or 100 years to know how people in Ukraine died, to know how many children, how many youths, how many elders, how many women. This is very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. This is your story is very powerful, and thank you for sharing this. And this is also for us very important to understand what you and your people face too. And thank you for sharing your way to justice, because we know that there were different stages of Sudanese situation, and you are almost in the same situation of ongoing conflict, which is also make this situation more complicated. І зараз I switch to Ukrainian.
And now, as I promised, we have Veronika Plotnikova, who is head of the Coordination Center for Support of Victims and Witnesses under the Prosecutor General's office. For us, civil society in Ukraine, it was very important that an official agency like that has been created, because we understand when there are so many victims, we need some center which would provide information to them on how the investigation goes, the court processes, a center that will support them. And finally, the Coordination Center for Victims and Witnesses have been created. It's still in development. There's lots of work in progress, but Veronika will present the idea of the center and the plans. Thank you, Olga. Thanks to everyone present here. Thank you for being here. I appreciate all the speakers for the stories they shared, the recommendations they gave. Indeed. Now, I don't have much time, but I would like to explain the essence. What is being created now in the aspect of criminal justice? Because we understand the war started 10 years ago, even though we've marked 1,000 days of the full-scale invasion yesterday, but it's been 10 years of the war. And all this time, the governmental apparatus that have been investigating war crime, they all were working. And we had the synergy with the civil society, they also do the documentation, but overall we can say that now we have 148,000 registered international crimes. These are facts that are known by the state, that have been verified, and some part of that are being investigated. But let's be honest, 148,000 crimes does not mean that we'll have 148,000 court verdicts. Firstly, when we talk about exaggerated or realistic expectations of the victims, this is the responsibility of the state, and we are working in this area. A lot of attention in the beginning and lots of expectations, there lots of focus, lots of energy of the victims was aimed at the creation of some tribunal, the activity of ICC, other institutions. But we must understand that the majority of the crimes must be investigated in the national jurisdiction. So the victims will be facing national law enforcement bodies, national judicial system, and our biggest challenge now is to make it human-centered, because the trauma, as was discussed, well, the trauma reflects on all of us. And in criminal cases, when you have to repeat your testimony, when you have to provide additional details, you cannot avoid re-traumatization. But we can make everything to make it as safe for the victims and witnesses as possible. That's why the center was created. We are a structural unit of the Prosecutor General's office, but we are not prosecutors. All my colleagues, there are 32 of us, they joined from other institutions, and in the background we have either psychological work or the provision of free of charge legal aid, social workers, case management, and lots of other stuff. We've started working since late January, and by now, besides our office, we have 9 units, like local centers, in frontline and or occupied areas in Chernihiv, Kiev, Sumy, Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk region. The offices stay in Dnipro now, but they responsible for those area, Mykolaiv and Kherson as well. And I'm originally from Kherson, so this story of Kherson is very dear to me. My family spent 25 months under occupation in Oleshki. They've experienced everything that happens in occupied territories, and part of my team, we all have this experience. So this is actually the story about understanding the victims and building confidence with them. What we do, we don't do documentation. We do not interview the victims, but we work with the prosecutors and investigators. We teach them how to build it in such a way so that these victims and witnesses do not feel that they're an object. So the matters of avoiding trauma and avoiding traumatizing others and avoiding self-traumatization in these interviews and investigations. Secondly, as the colleague already said, recommending the victim-centered approach, we provide support and comprehensive care. We understand very well that so much things are being done, so much is being implemented in the country. But what we see the total lack of communication with the victims. And the victims find it difficult to understand what they can receive and where. So, if you talk about case management of a specific victim, this is just explanations in simple language. So the victim understands what is going on and when, and it includes the assessment of the needs, because the victims have really different needs. We understand that. We understand that there are different types, different priorities. It can be anything from getting a different job or assistance in professional education, or getting dental care, or finding permanent residence instead of a bed and shelter. So it's a comprehensive thing, especially when we talk about children victims, the victims of war crimes. Usually, if there's a child in the family, the whole family needs support, because the parents would have the deep feeling of guilt, that the parents would be witnesses and they must help their child. And thirdly, it's the primary psychological care, preparation to interviews, and de-rolling after the interviews.
Because really, usually attention is paid before, but after the person spends several hours at the interviews, it's very difficult to go back to their regular role in life, and we have to kick in here. The fourth thing, which pertains to war-specific things. We were speaking about reparations. In Ukraine, we have just one project which actually deals with reparations or partial reparations to those who suffered sexual violence. But it's important for us that that there would be this whole system developed in the country. So I can tell you that the greatest share of the efforts is initiated by the civil society organizations, NGO, and we have great collaborators, and we have our own referral mechanism and great cooperation with our partners who work with specific groups of survivors, because we know actually what's out there. The central level cannot be present in every region of Ukraine, but we try to have this mini network in every region. Also, we have a memorandum of understanding between the prosecutor's office and civil society organizations in terms of victims and witnesses support, and actually Media Initiative for Human Rights also joined this memorandum. We are very happy about this. We cooperate with the International Losses Registry, And if to speak about the design of the procedure and transparency of these procedures for the victims, because we are now getting new applications within new cases, and we can actually have this test mode in order to understand whether this is a convenient approach for survivors and victims. I would really like, to all the procedures to have better testing first, not to be in production at once. But we have what we have. We work with governmental agencies. Yes, really, the greatest share of the efforts is really on the shoulders of the civil society organizations, but we need to build the state system, the governmental system structure working with the survivors. We had to do this in 2014. Unfortunately, Ukraine was learning these difficult lessons for a certain period of time. And today there was this law adopted on the non-material losses incurred due to the armed aggression. And in Ukraine, we are going to have this new notion, the system of measures to support victims. We are cooperating with the National Police of Ukraine, the social services, the National Health Service in order to provide all these proper services to people who sustained certain losses due to war. In order to get access to certain services, you need to get all these statuses first. Being just the survivor or victim within the of the war crime gives you nothing or doesn't give you enough. We need to build these mechanisms in such a way for people to understand this is an entry point. This is why I have to cooperate in order to get this. This is all about proper communication, which is why we are working on the communication strategy about victims and for the victims. And it's very important to have this peer approach in this regard. And any decisions for the victims shall not be taken without victims being present. And I strongly hope we will work on the gaps. We cooperate with alumni, men who are survivors of sexual violence and who were held in captivity. And we start working with our victims who moved abroad, because actually today a lot was said about international jurisdiction. It's very important that the Poland launches the international jurisdiction system in their country, because a lot of Ukrainians are there. They are victims in the cases we are considering. They are also victims, but because of all these gaps in the legislation, they somehow get much more obligations compared to the rights. So we are very interested to change the situation. And we are working with the memorialization and institutional memory. So now we've just finalized creating the terms of reference. As regards launching the unified registry of victims, we will start for sure with the victims of war crimes. But let us be frank, not a single country where the conflict was happening did not avoid this huge wave of victimization later on and increase in criminality. We understand there will be more challenges, but we need to start managing this system right now, because later on it will be too difficult to cope. And yet another thing pertaining to very specific things would be for sure safety and security of victims, especially those who left the occupied territories and those who still have families and relatives at the temporarily occupied territories. They are ready to participate and be the witnesses, but Russia is actually tracking it down. Russia is accumulating information, and it's always about, rational fears of the victims that Russians will learn about me cooperating and it will influence the safety and security status of my relatives. We cooperate with our colleagues from Bosnia, who's got huge experience and who retailored their system completely. And this story about creating the victims support units, it's not new, but it's very necessary. So Before again launching it all full-fledgedly, we communicated a lot with our colleagues from Croatia, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and from European countries that never went through war, but those who were developing systems like this. And a few months ago, I came back from the Democratic Republic of Congo. We work with McVeigh Foundation in order to understand this holistic approach of the complete cycle of support, because what really matters would be working with the economic support later on, building capacities. We understand that we still need to do a lot, and currently we have 1,200 beneficiaries, meaning those who actively cooperate with the center, very various categories, from children who got mind blast trauma, their families, and there are some families who sustained several mind blast traumas, unfortunately, up to those who came back from captivity, ex-military, active duty military, civilian hostages again, elderly people who require special assistance, and many more categories. And a month ago, 9 new units were launched, and actually people were invited through this open procedure. This actually new profession is being created, and we dedicate a lot of time to training of our prosecutors and investigators. Let us be frank, the criminal justice system was not ready for this very scope we are facing now, and we were not ready that this all will be investigated during the active phase of conflict. We are very cautious as regards our expectations and planning, but actually we need to forecast something, right? There's this horizon of planning and forecasting. We are working with prosecutors and investigators. We're training them, and we're also learning some very good lessons. We're gaining great skills in what way to work with the survivors, starting with the possible triggers we can incidentally initiate during an interview. For example, there was this very important interview with the survivor, and it was a failure because actually she hated red color, and she couldn't tolerate the smell of tobacco because it reminded her of the perpetrator. So we need to retailor the attitude. It does not require changes in any legislation. It requires some changes in the heart and mind. I'm very cautious about being too optimistic, but still, based on what I see, I can hope that these seeds will grow up and we'll harvest them. What else? What's very therapeutical for some of the survivors, that they are being involved in working with other victims. There were several victims who actually asked us to become our volunteers, and they are now really included into our procedures and activities. What else? In Bucha, we've opened up a hub on investigating war crimes because, you know, there's this big Bucha case, and the work is arranged in such a way that the big group of investigators from the NPU is there, and our coordinators are working there as well. This is all in one building, though in different rooms. It's all designed using this new approach, not the Soviet era approaches. We prepare witnesses and victims for interview. We work with them later on. And it's very important to also work with the community, especially taking into account that we have these huge processes of internal migration. And again, it's very important that the communities where there are IDPs, internally displaced persons, for the hosting communities to understand in what way they can help and how to integrate the IDPs. We need to understand that the communities are changing. For example, Zakarpattia or Transcarpathian community changed completely in terms of economic potential because a lot of enterprises are relocating there, and composition of the community. Well, that's to be brief, a short description of what we have. Thank you so much, dear Veronica, for great presentation. We know it a little bit, but it was interesting for our guests, and it's always interesting to listen to the stories of our speakers and listening to your presentation. I thought it's great happiness and privilege for us to have our own state and be on the same side. We can be criticizing each other. We can actually not agree with something, but still we have our own country, our own state, and it wants to help you. That's really great. That's huge. And that's happiness. And I wish the same to our speakers.
We are running out of time. I think we have very few minutes for a small question if someone has. If no, I have one. Чи є питання в залі до нас?
Do we have questions in the room to our dear speakers?
To Tanya, yes.
Okay, so just the first one. Yes, so I'm Tatiana from Human Rights Center Zmina, International Advocacy Manager. Nice to see all of you here. And so I have the question about the missing people. So I heard that in the majority of situations there are victims who are missing. So I know that Syria has already the mechanism on missing people, which was launched on the base of the UN through the UN General Assembly resolution, I think. So maybe one of the speakers could tell more about this, the mechanism, how it works, whether it works, and maybe we could benefit all from this because all of us have similar situations with missing people. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. I think Fadel can start, yes, and then if anybody wants. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. I think establish of the missing person is one of the achievement of the Syrian conflict. There is other also. I couldn't highlight all of them in one presentation because there is specific points the organizer requested from me to highlight it. There is also the expandination, for example, and a few days ago, the OPCW proved that Russia used the chemical weapons in Ukraine. Not proof Russia, but they proved that chemical weapons being used. In Syria, there is expandination also for the mandate of the OPCW. They have now authority to identify who is the perpetrator. Before they don't, there was also a mechanism established by the UN Security Council to identify who used the chemical weapons, but Russia blocked and ended this mechanism. So after that, there is this expandination of the OPCW, similar to what's happened, as I mentioned, when there is a trial to refer to the ICC, there is exist court when it's a blocked and continuous block by Russia, and then the Russian intervention, then the European move to universal jurisdiction. Now, similar of the missing person. Missing person, there was like a call because Syria, of course, all the conflict is facing a tremendous amount of the missing person. But like our database referring that those are the documented one, we are talking about 160,000 who's arbitrary arrest or missing person. So about 114,000 are forcibly disappeared. Comparing to the Syrian population, which is 24 million, that means that the disaster in Syria is the worst in all around the world, even previous area like Argentina or other else. Based on this huge and systematic disappearance in Syria and the continuity of the disappearance, because in Syria, who's like being arbitrary arrest, 90% from those amount to be forced disappearance. So the majority who is subjected to be arrested, arbitrarily arrested, they disappeared in Assad Center detention. So that lead a tremendous call from the Commission of Inquiry in Syria, from family leagues, from individual families, from human rights organization, all of those, they call for, we need a specific body in the UN to take care about this dilemma, take care about this specific issue, which is huge. So those calls, actually, the establishment of mechanism, it took years. Recommendation, and build on this recommendation and movement and meeting with the UN bodies, especially the Commission of Inquiry in Syria and also the Office of the High Commissioner. Both of them, they played a tremendous role, coordinating also with other states, also in support with the international organization like Human Rights Watch support the call, Amnesty International also support the call, the Syrian human rights organization like Syrian Network for Human Rights, and also, as I mentioned, the families leagues. So all of these efforts finally subjected and lead to a call in the General Assembly where there is no veto. And this similar to the establishment of the IIIM, the international also mechanism to investigate the crimes in Syria. Also, this is established by the UN General Assembly at the end of 2016. So from that experience, but this mechanism was general, investigate disappearance, but also investigate a shelling, attacks against hospitals, attacks against, so it's documented everything. But this, for the missing person, this is dedicated only for the missing person. What is also another distinction is this mechanism will not actually interfere in accountability. That means they will not identify the perpetrator. So that it's less influence than the IIIM. It's also less, which I referred to at the end of 2016, it's less influence and power than the Commission of Inquiry, for example. The Commission of Inquiry, which is established in the summer of 2011, they have the power and the mandate to identify the perpetrator and to accuse them. And they describe what is the regime, Assad regime committed in Syria, in the missing person, in this appearance and torture in Syria. They describe it as crimes against humanity and accuse Assad forces and his institution, the security forces, and other in committing crimes against humanity and war crimes, in torture and in forced disappearance. The other mechanism, this established by the UN, it's only a humanitarian. It's only focusing on mainly revealing the fate. Where is those? Rather than accusing those who committed those crimes. I think in spite of this very limited power and influence, it's still a considerable issue, and it's still a considerable institution, because even revealing the fate, as I mentioned in my intervention, there is like the expectation. It's different from family to family, from victims to another. A lot of families, they want Assad to held accountable. Other families, they want to sustain the narrative. They want to know where is those loved one. So, and I think human rights need to work on different level. So not all of us focus only, even in our organization. So we are supporting all of those mechanisms simultaneously at the same time, supporting sharp accountability against Assad and Putin and also PYD, and also even the opposition who committed the crimes. All of them, they need to held accountable and impose sanctions against them, whatever. Also, but at the same time, if this IIMP, this missing person, institution of missing person, they don't have this power, they don't have this mandate. That doesn't prevent us to cooperate with them. We should cooperate with this because it will help other family and it will help us also because they have actually the right to reveal their fate and also this is achievement revealing the fate because those perpetrators want to cause a maximum harm against us as a victims, including don't revealing the fate, don't acknowledge what's happened to those because as you know this appearance will not only limited to the victims itself, it's extended to the society, it's causing fear and terror in between the community. They are afraid to engage in any opposing those Assad regime because maybe he will disappear. What will happen to his wife? She cannot marry, and what is about his heritage? So a lot of actually discussion and a lot of harm will cause to and extend to the society. So it's an achievement. And also, as I mentioned,
Dear Fidel, I have
similar
to
to
interrupt
universal,
you because we have very
one
limited time.
minute,
Yeah, please, 30 seconds.
yeah, 10 seconds. It also will draw the attention of the scale and these crimes. So it has another achievement by highlighting the scale and putting these crimes on the table. This is another achievement. Thank you and sorry for being long.
No, it's okay. This is very interesting. Unfortunately, we will have electricity cut in 10 minutes. So we were informed about this. So that's why we are a little bit in rush. Natya has some, just, yeah, very, very shortly.
Yeah, very shortly. I just want to highlight, because we were talking about how international law is scattered and not responsive to the needs of victims. So, we're really glad that this mechanism was created for Syria. And I know, as just highlighted, it took a lot of efforts and time and advocacy. But I think what's also missing is having permanent mechanisms like that. Like, why not have a permanent UN mechanism on missing persons, and then you open offices where, they are needed. In the case of the double IMP, it's on Syria, and in our situation, a lot of Yazidis were taken to Syria. So we had discussions with them, we highlighted that, but what about Yazidis who are missing in other places? And I had very recently a Yazidi man who came to me and he told me he found his little brother. He's sure it's him. Someone took him and pretend it's their family member, and he has no mechanism to prove, to get a DNA test, to get that child back. So it's very, very complicated. And I think that missing persons issue should also always be linked to the exhumations of mass graves, because a lot of people are missing and disappeared, but unfortunately they might be dead, and the families need to know that. And again, in our context, UNITAD closed, and we still have 30 mass graves that need to be opened. And opening the mass graves is not enough. You also need identification process of DNA matching, same way you're doing here. The problem in our context is that Yazidi survivors are scattered all over the place. They go to Australia, they go to Canada, they go to US. Once in a while, they're called by the authorities to be back to Iraq just to give a blood sample. So we're pushing these authorities to have agreements in place. But if there was a UN mechanism, who could deal with that, that would make things easier.
Thank you very much. And I'm hearing a lot of issues that I'm sure Ukrainians, unfortunately, will also face too, especially with adopting children and seeking for missing persons. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. That was my question, but I will answer it myself about how we can interact with each other for creating like a common model of achieving justice. But what is more important, to prevent further crimes. I think we have to be united as a human rights defenders from all over the world. We have sometimes, from time to time, coming to The Hague or to New York, to Geneva. We like competing with each other. This is like a tragedies competition, which sounds awful, but I think that only being united, only sharing our experience, we can achieve these models that can address victims' expectations, survivors' expectations, that can provide us with the right to truth, with memorialization, and once again, what is the most important, to hold perpetrators accountable and to prevent other wars, other conflicts, and other crimes. Thank you very much for this discussion. I'm so sorry that we have so limited time, but I think that was very fruitful. The broadcast, as I said already, was on 2 YouTube channels of Media Initiative for Human Rights and Crimea platform. You can watch it another day. Thanks to Chernihiv Educational Human Rights House. We were here so comfortable. Thanks a lot for our interpreters for wonderful translation. I'm sure everyone understood what we were talking about. Just to mention, we will have 2 very intensive days of Crimea Global Conference. Please follow us on our social media pages, on YouTube channels, and you will hear and see more from our guests from all over the world, from non-Western countries. We will share our experiences and talk about how we can cooperate to address Russian aggressions and other dictatorship activities from in different countries. Thank you very much. Have a calm evening and peaceful one. Goodbye. Fadel, thank you. Thank you for staying with us for so long. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.